Madhava Kunja Bihari Jayo Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jan Vishnupad Paramamsa Parajacharya Astro Tarsata Shishimad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Jan Vishnupad Paramamsa Parajacharya Astro Tarsata Shishimad Shringa Guru Shila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Premsako Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhaktavinda Ki Jai Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopi Gopinath Shyamakund Radhakund Giri Govardhan Ki Jai Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai Mayapur Dham Ki Jai Navadvip Dham Ki Jai Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai Jamuna Mai Ki Jai Ganga Mai Ki Jai Tulsi Devi Ki Jai Bhakti Devi Ki Jai Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavad Gita Ki Jai Transcendental Book Distribution Ki Jai Harinam Sankirtan Jaga Ki Jai Transcendental Prasadam Distribution Ki Jai Gaura Premananda Hari Hari Bo All glories to the Sama devotees Hare Krishna All glories to the Sama devotees Hare Krishna All glories to the Sama devotees Hare Krishna All glories to Shri Shri Guru Shri Gauranga Glories to Srila Prabhupada Jai Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya So today we have a presentation for you. And today we're going to discuss about the wisdom from the Bhagavad Gita, the Srimad Bhagavatam, and the Chaitanya Charitamrita. Has anybody heard of these books? Has everyone heard of these books? Okay, a few people heard of them. Bhagavad Gita it's considered to be the foundational study in spiritual consciousness. And it's the word of God. It means the song of God, actually. Bhagavad Gita. And it firmly establishes the essential philosophical truths. And then the Srimad Bhagavatam, it's considered to be a graduate study. It's the narrations of God that describe the enchanting character of Krishna and his saintly devotees. And then the Chaitanya Charitamrita, it's considered to be the postgraduate study of spirituality. And it reveals the mind of God and the inner life of Krishna and the appreciation and attraction he feels when he's conquered by the love of his devotees. So this is very nicely described there. So in this age where there's spiritual apathy and material allure, Lord Chaitanya, he propagated the Nam Sankirtan, which offers the living entities a lifeline to experience the profound happiness that comes from a relationship with God. So this is a very accurate, authentic philosophy. It's like a biography of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And it'll inspire us to take full advantage of a priceless gift, which we'll talk about. So just in regard to give you some reference of the Srimad Bhagavatam, there's a verse in the 12th canto, and it starts like this: Sarva Vedanta Saranam Hi Sri Bhagavatam Ishyate. And what that says, the translation is, Srimad Bhagavatam is declared to be the essence of all the Vedic philosophy. One who has felt satisfaction from its nectarian mallow will never be attracted to anything else, or to speak of any other literature. And then Jiva Goswami, who wrote in the Tattvas and Darbhas. He was a great scholar and follower of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And he says that the Srimad Bhagavatam is the highest book in creation. Can you imagine that? And so the Srimad Bhagavatam is considered to be the Amala Purana. That means it's the one without any imperfections. So if we really want to know what is true, then we have to learn from hearing. It's called Shabda, from authoritative spiritual sources. So that's especially the Srimad Bhagavatam. So we're going to discuss about going from forgetfulness to freedom. And there's a beautiful lecture given by Srila Prabhupada here in Los Angeles. And this was in December 4th, 1968. And it's only 2 minutes. I just got a 2-minute clip. And it's going to talk about the whole treatment of human society should be to cure us from the disease of forgetfulness of our relationship with Krishna. And he also mentions, if you listen real carefully, he said even a small percentage of the population, if they become Krishna conscious, it can change the face of the world. So let's get right into it. I'll just play it. Let me make sure that the sound is on. Hopefully. Make sure this is on. Okay, let's see if it'll play now. So did you catch that, what the percentage was? Did you hear that? It was 1% or less. So that's interesting, and that's of the population. I did some research to see what is our current population. It's 8.2 billion on the planet Earth. And if you get 1% of that, it's 82 million. And that's about the population of Germany, which has 84 million. So we have a lot of work to do still. But just see, it's so nice. And another place, there's another lecture Srila Prabhupada said, just similar to what he said here. So it is not expected, however, that % population of the world will be such free from all contamination. But even a certain percentage only, even most insignificant 1% or less of that, in millions in one, then the face of the world will change. So that's the power of Krishna consciousness. So, and we'll continue here with our, as we see some visual elements here. So we're seeing a gradient background, and that represents transformation from darkness to light. So all the Vedic literatures, they instruct us in that way. There's a Sanskrit term, it says tamasi ma jyotir gama. Don't remain in this darkness, go to the light. And then in the Bhagavad Gita, there's a verse in the 15th chapter. It says, Natad bhashyate suryo, na sasanko na pavakaha, yad gatva na divartante, tadama paramam mama. That abode of mine is not illuminated by the sun or moon, nor by electricity. When it reaches it, it never returns to this material world. So we see this material world, by nature it's dark. And we're artificially illuminating it with electric lights, fire, and so on. But in any case, it's still dark. But in the spiritual nature, it's described here that it's full of light. So we see when the sun is present, there's no darkness. So similarly, every planet in the spiritual sky is self-luminous. There's no need for the sun or moon or electricity. So that's described there. So we see that it moved from left to right. The progress is from forgetfulness to freedom. And then we have another visual here, which is the key. And this represents knowledge. It's the process of discovery. Spiritual or scriptural knowledge. It unlocks our understanding. And there's three key elements that can help us unlock our full spiritual potential. And the first key or idea is that we have to have that drive for spiritual growth, right? We have to have the first desire. And in the Vedic literatures, it's described as sambandha. Is to try to understand, what is my relationship with Krishna? So that's that deep intrinsic drive to understand who we are, what our relationship is with God. We have to have that burning desire. So that's interesting. It's not just about just coming to the temple or attending festivals. Those are great. But it's about having a deep yearning to revive our eternal relationship with Krishna. So that's we have to have this purpose of our life. And then the second key is that we have to have this, we have to have the desire first of all, and then we have to have the discipline and the hard work that comes with it in order to achieve that. And in the Vedic term, it's described as abhideya. It's the practices of devotional service where discipline and hard work come in. So this is just by knowing, okay, I'm an eternal servant of Krishna, it's not enough, but we need to act on it. So that's what we're teaching. So like Rupa Goswami, he teaches in his books, he says that we need enthusiasm, utasahan, and we need confidence and patience to achieve this. And then the third key is what we call our sadhana, our practice, our daily service. So it's described we should have nityam bhagavata sevaya. We should always be hearing and chanting about Krishna. That's very important in our understanding. Just like every morning, devotees pick up their beads, they chant, they come to the temple. Or people at home, they have their own little altars. They go in there, worship their deities, they chant, they offer their food. So these three keys, they work together to help us understand our relationship with Krishna. We have the drive, we have the discipline, and then we have the daily devotional routine that we do. And that keeps us steady and inspired. So together, all three of these keys, they help us attain the ultimate goal, which we'll talk about here. But first, we're going to show another graphic here. This is the growing path. That's our journey. It's a curved path. It's not straight. It's guided. And the Vedic literatures, they give us a roadmap for this journey. And that's why Srila Prabhupada brought these books, the Srimad Bhagavatam, the Bhagavad Gita, the Chaitanya Charitamrita, because it can convince anyone why they need to get on this path. And what does that path lead to? Is the treasure chest. And that symbolizes our eternal treasure. It's light emanating from that treasure you can see there. That's our spiritual knowledge. So this is the path to discovering our eternal treasure. And you see the colors here, just to analyze the colors and everything, to help bring out some points, is we have this deep blue. It's has deep spiritual depth to it. The gold is divine knowledge, and the white text represents clarity and purity. So there's a nice quote which I think sets up our basic problem. It establishes the context, and it creates intrigue about the solution. And it touches upon all our universal experiences of suffering. And this is the quote. Forgetting Krishna, the living entity has been attracted by the external feature from time immemorial. Therefore, the illusory energy Maya gives him all kinds of misery in his material existence. So this shows everything, the basic problem. We're attracted to something else besides Krishna. This is where we are. And what is the solution then? What we see our experience here is we're suffering. So this is a very relevant topic to our current times. We see many people are searching for ways to maintain their spiritual consciousness while at the same time fulfilling their worldly responsibilities. And so the teaching that we can remain eternally free is still while engaging in a particular form of, work or activities in the material world. And in the Vedic literatures like the Srimad Bhagavatam, it reminds us, it's like it uses an analogy of a deep sleep. When you go into a deep sleep and you're feeling completely disoriented, like for a moment you forget where you are, right? You forget who you are. So they gave this analogy that just like a wealthy person, he's lost all his money. And he becomes so distressed, he thinks, I am lost. But really think about it. Did he lose himself? Or did he just lose his money? So this is what exactly happens in our material consciousness. We're so absorbed in our false identity of this body, our possessions, our designations, that we think that we've lost ourselves. But just like a wealthy person, he hasn't actually lost himself. We can never really be lost either. We're eternal spirit souls, eternal servants of Krishna. There's these philosophers, they say that ultimately we merge into oneness and we lose our individuality. They're called Mayavadis. But that's not what Krishna teaches. Even in the highest stages of spiritual realization, our individuality still remains. It's like when you clean a mirror, the reflection, it becomes clear, right? But the mirror is still there. So similarly, when we purify ourselves from the false ego of identifying with these bodies, these things, when we purify that false ego, we don't lose our identity. We finally understand our real identity as Krishna's servants. So when you look around, you see everything. Actually, everything belongs to Krishna. In the Ishopanishad it says, Ishavashamidam sarvam. Just like that money doesn't really belong to any individual person, everything actually belongs to Krishna. So when we really understand that, it's actually liberating. We don't have to anxiously try to grab and possess everything. We can simply serve Krishna with whatever he kindly gives us. So this is our Krishna conscious journey. It's about awakening to this truth. It's about shifting our truth, our thinking, that I'm the enjoyer or I'm the controller. It's to understand our natural position as Krishna's loving servants. And this is real liberation. It's not losing our identity, but it's finding our true eternal identity in our relationship with Krishna. So let's move on. So there's, from the Srimad Bhagavatam, that's why I mentioned these three literatures, because we're going to be reading from Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, and the Chaitanya Charitamrita. There's wonderful stories and analogies, and I'm trying to bring it to illustration for you. So there's this king. You can see him there standing in front of his throne. His name is King Nimi. And once upon a time, these great sages, there's 9 of them, they were visiting him. And he was so eager that they came because he knew there were rishis. They were able to see things that most people can't see. They can understand spiritual knowledge. So immediately, when he saw them, he didn't waste a single moment. Like, when we meet someone, we say, oh, how are you? What have you been up to? And this, that. No, he just immediately said, he just approached them. And this is what he said. This is the verse. Ata atyantikam ksemam. Oh, I have it here for you. This is from the 11th canto, 2nd verse. So it goes, Ata antikam ksemam. Prichamo bhavato nangaha samsaresmin ksandaro pi satsanga sevadir ninam. This is a very powerful verse. So this last line, satsanga, means the association of devotees of the Lord, and sevadi means a great treasure, and nrinam means human beings. So this is a translation. Therefore, O completely sinless one, or ones, I ask you to kindly tell me what the supreme good is. After all, even a half a moment's association with pure devotees within this world of birth and death is a priceless treasure for any man. So it shows the importance of saintly people, of devotees, people that represent Krishna, people that are spreading this transcendental knowledge. They're like treasures. It's amazing. And then if we go to the Bhagavad Gita now, this is something interesting I wanted to share with you. We're living in this fascinating time where everybody's running around, they're trying to accumulate more and more. 2 cars, 2 houses, 2 phones, 2 TVs. And it's really ironic because after spending all day driving our comfortable cars to work, and then what do? We drive to the gym and we pay good money to walk on the treadmill. And where do you go? Nowhere. So just see. So this is a verse from the Bhagavad Gita, the 14th chapter. And this is text number 5. Sattvam rajas tama iti guna prakriti sambhava nibbānanti mahabaho dehi dehinam avyayam. And this is a translation. Material nature consists of 3 modes: goodness, passion, and ignorance. When the living entity comes in contact with nature, O mighty armed Arjuna, he becomes conditioned by these modes. So just see like the puppeteer has the strings that it's controlling the puppets. So that's what we're like in the material world. We're like puppets being controlled by these 3 modes of material nature, which are goodness, passion, and ignorance. And they're like, you could say, they're like colored lenses through which we see the world. We're either influenced through the lens of goodness, through the lens of where everything's clear, we feel peaceful, joyful, wise, like the morning sun. We see everything perfectly. But when there's passion, which is called Rajaguna, and that's what we see. We look around every day. It's like the constant drive for more and more. And I'm sure many of you have noticed that we spend our youth losing our health to gain wealth, and then we spend our old age spending all our wealth to get our health back. Is that amazing? And you see, passion increases, and Krishna specifically points out here that we develop these symptoms of great attachment, intense activity, uncontrollable desires. Sound familiar? We all have these. So this is the modern life. It's to try to keep us in this Rajaguna. So anyway, the Acharyas, they give us this wisdom that we should try to understand simple living, high thinking. Srila Prabhupada emphasized that so often, again and again. It's not about having the most, it's about needing the least. That's real wealth. When we can sit peacefully, chant the holy name, feel completely satisfied, that's true prosperity. And now it's not easy to go against the grain when everyone else is running after the latest gadget, the biggest house. We're trying to simplify our lives to focus on Krishna. Sometimes we might think we're strange, and we may face doubts, temptations. But Krishna says we have to remember that we're transcendental souls, but somehow or another we've gotten caught up in these modes of material nature. And it's like we're wearing colored glasses that makes everything look different than it actually is. So our job is to actually lift ourselves up through this goodness towards pure Krishna consciousness. So the next time we find ourselves caught up in the modern rush of life here, we could just take a moment to remember King Nimi's wisdom, where he said in the previous verse that even a moment of spiritual association, a moment of Krishna consciousness is worth more than all the wealth in the world. And if we try to live in such a way, every moment can become an opportunity to remember Krishna. So, would you like to hear more detail about the modes, or should we go on? Do you have any questions about the modes? We didn't really discuss the different modes. We kind of discussed passion and goodness. Ignorance is the worst mode. We didn't discuss that much, but it's the mode that brings laziness, delusion, lack of awareness. It manifests as procrastination, confusion, the tendency to make harmful choices for ourselves and for others. So under this influence, you're caught in the cycle of inertia and negativity. So it's So that's the interplay of these different modes, and they're always fighting for supremacy. Sometimes we're in goodness, sometimes we're in passion, sometimes we're in ignorance. So we're always fighting for these modes. So that's why in the beginning we talked about we should have purposeful lives. What is our purpose? Why do we come here? What are we doing? So that we can understand these things. So there's a nice purport I'd like to just read. This is from the second canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Prabhupada is saying this. It's astonishing to see how a person who is being kicked by the laws of the Lord's illusory energy at every step can falsely think of becoming one with the Lord. Such thinking is the last snare of the illusory energy offered to the conditioned soul. The first illusion is that he wants to become Lord of the mature world by accumulating wealth and power. But when he's frustrated in that attempt, he wants to be one with the Lord. So both becoming the most powerful man in the world and desiring to become one with the Lord are different illusory snares. So Prabhupada, in his wisdom, is helping us understand these Vedic literatures. He doesn't hold back any punches here. So he's saying it like it is. There's a nice analogy also given in the Srimad Bhagavatam. I like this analogy because it's very beautiful. It's about the sun reflecting on the water. Like you've noticed, you see a scene like this. You see the sun perfectly being reflected. It's very remarkable. The sun is way up in the sky. but it's reflecting on the water, but it seems to be there on the water sometimes. It almost looks when the water is very still. But is it really? And then when the water is moving, it might even be like it is here, moving. It's being affected by the waves. Or sometimes the water is muddy. But is it actually touching the sun? Not at all. The sun remains completely unaffected. It's radiating light from far above. And this is exactly how a devotee lives in the material world. We might have our jobs, our families, our daily activities, but just like the reflection we see there in the water, our real consciousness, our true self, remains fixed on Krishna, untouched by these material situations. So just like the sun is not actually in the water, so we are actually not in the material world. We're spiritual beings, eternal servants of Krishna. And there's something even more remarkable about this analogy. When you're in a dark room, there's a little sunlight, it enters and it reflects off the mirror. And just by that, it can illuminate the whole space. So similarly, when we allow Krishna consciousness to enter our hearts, it illuminates our entire existence. It helps us see everything in relationship with Krishna. So this is the real secret of Bhakti Yoga. And we don't have to run away to the Himalayas, reject everything material. Just like the sun's reflection, we can be fully present in this world while remaining completely untouched by it. And how? By keeping our consciousness fixed on Krishna through our devotional service. So we can remember this analogy when things get difficult, when the waters of material life get choppy, when challenges come. You're like the sun, and your Krishna consciousness, your devotional service, keeps you high above the water, untouched. You remain serene in your loving relationship with Krishna. So that's nice. So this is a nice analogy. We could break this down further if you have any questions about this particular analogy. But just quickly, the sun represents the soul, or the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. He's the source of the light. He remains aloof, unaffected by the surroundings. And the water, it symbolizes the material world. It's in constant flux. It has impurities. It's always changing. It's under the three modes of material nature, and that influences us. And then the reflection, it depicts the apparent interaction of the soul with the material world. While the reflection appears to be on the water surface, it remains separate entity, untouched by the water's qualities. So just to give you a little more information there. So let's move on. So here is a journey that we're talking about a little bit. We'll just go through the stages real quick. The journey from our false ego, thinking we're the body, to our real ego. And this is the showing from the conditioned state, the beginning practices, the steady practice, and our pure consciousness. Just like going from darkness to light, or going from our purpose to gradually become determined, have the desire, engage in the activities, like that. So let's just go through these very quickly here. So stage one is when the false ego is identifying with the body. There's a nice verse in the Srimad Bhagavatam also that goes like this. When the soul is under the spell of material nature and false ego, identifying his body as the self, he becomes absorbed in material activities, and by that influence of false ego, he thinks that he's the proprietor of everything. So there's so many verses that describe that some or another, the living entity can feel our existence as a seer, but because of the disappearance of the ego during the state of deep sleep, he falsely takes himself to be lost, like the man who's lost his fortune and feels distressed. So that's that first part there. So then we go to the beginning practice. This is the understanding of spiritual knowledge when you're starting your devotional service. And there's another verse that depicts this. The Supreme Personality of God has said, one can get liberation by seriously discharging devotional service unto me And then by hearing for a long time about me or from me, by thus executing one's prescribed duties, there will be no reaction, and one will be freed from the contamination of matter. So just see here how this is our process. We're still mixed with material motives. We're trying to understand, and then it's like we're waking up, fluctuating between material and spiritual consciousness. And then when we go to the third stage, the steady practice, when we're in our regular devotional service, natural detachment develops, and clear understanding of false ego we understand. And there's a verse that describes that. By discovering the faultiness of his desiring to lord it over material nature, and by therefore giving it up, the living entity becomes independent and stands in his own glory. And then the last stage, pure consciousness, is when we're liberated while living. We see everything in relation to Krishna. There's no material contamination. And there's a quote for that. This is from also the Srimad Bhagavatam. One should be situated in the transcendental position beyond the stages of material consciousness and should be aloof from all other conceptions of life. Thus, realizing freedom from false ego, one should see his own self just as he sees the sun in the sky. So back to our analogy of the sun reflected in the water, how we're unaffected, we have this full spiritual vision, and our identity is established. So we'll move on here to this is going to be about the house of illusion. There's a Sanskrit term described as prashaktam ashatam pati, the mind's natural attraction to temporary material existence. So just like the dream troubles, they don't affect the awakened person, right? So that symbolizes how material problems don't disturb the self-realized soul. So I'd just like to make one thing, I guess you could say a disclaimer. I don't want to come across as, or we don't want to come across also as a type of person who dismisses people's real struggles just by telling them to get some perspective, right? We're not trying to be like a detached, judgmental, Mr. Perspective people. But rather, the Bhagavatam's intent and our intent is to genuinely connect with people and help them see that they're not alone, not to diminish the real pain and difficulty they're facing, especially now, as we see happening today in California. So the Vedas, they want to convey that gaining perspective is not about minimizing problems, but it's about finding strength and resilience in the shared human experience of facing hardships. And so what they're trying to do is, the Vedas, is offer a deeper sense of community and understanding, not just superficial cheer-up message, So I just wanted to clarify that we're not just trying to be the perspective people, but the Vedas, they demonstrate empathy and an understanding that crises and struggles are very real, even as they encourages a broader viewpoint. So it's about finding balance between acknowledging difficulty and finding the growth opportunities within it. So this is a verse I like to read. This is also from the Srimad Bhagavatam. When the soul is under the spell of material nature and false ego, identifying his body as the self, he becomes absorbed in material activities, and by the influence of false ego, he thinks that he is the proprietor of everything. So just back to that point again about the man, he loses his money and he thinks, I am lost. I'm lost completely. But actually, he's not lost. So Prabhupada says in the purport to this verse, it says, no, you are not the money. Your money is lost. You are still the same person. But when we are attached, we think like that. So this is a story about the house of illusion and the flickering mind. It's like a story of false identity and real understanding. So this is we're going to have the opening scene here. It illustrates what the Bhagavatam means about false identification. So here's a prosperous homeowner. He arranged to sell his house. The deal was set. The price, was agreed upon. The family looking forward to the transaction. Everything seemed secure and certain. And then fate had other plans. And this is a verse from the Bhagavatam. The devotee can vividly feel his existence as the seer, but because of the disappearance of the ego during the state of deep sleep, he falsely takes himself to be lost, like the man who has lost his fortune and feels distress thinking he is lost. So what happened is the fire breaks out unexpectedly, the house is severely damaged, and the father, he has an emotional breakdown. So we see this from the news today, even one man said, "You realize how vulnerable you are and the importance of community." Someone just said this. And another person said, "It's surreal, it's like a dream. It's like a movie." So Prabhupada mentions in the second canto how there's a description of the spiritual sky, and in the spiritual sky, its nature and its features are discussed. There's spiritual airplanes, there's living entities, they travel like lightning in these planes, and it's simply here, it's an imitation. Prabhupada says there, whatever we see here is simply a shadow of what exists there. The material world is like a cinema, wherein we are but an imitation or a shadow of the real thing that is existing. This material world is only a shadow. Okay, so back to the story. So here the man's saying, "Oh, we're lost. We've become beggars. We're ruined." And then he's on this emotional roller coaster. We're going to see here. So his son says, "Father, don't worry. The buyers, they still want to pay the promised amount." And then the father instantly, he transforms from despair to joy. "Oh, really? Then let it go." And then the second son comes and says, "But what if they change their mind when they see the damage?" And then the father plunges back again into despair. "Oh no, we're in trouble." And then the third son comes and he says, "Don't worry, I spoke to them. They'll buy regardless of the condition." And then the father's joy returns again. "We're saved, we're saved." So just see in a few minutes' time how his identity changed to happiness, to distress, to happiness, to distress, and then to happiness again. So this is the point that today, in our own lives, we see such little things like we act like zombies if we just lose our phone, or if we, miss something or forget something. It's like something happens to us. We're unable to interact normally. We become completely transformed by our material loss. Or someone does something wrong and we don't talk to them for days. This false identification. So just imagine ourselves, we're like an actor on a stage. The world is a stage, and your role is temporary. We shouldn't get lost in the drama and the play. We do have to remember our true identity. We're the soul. We're the eternal actor. We're capable of experiencing boundless joy beyond the stage. So this illusory dream of this lording it over in the material world will vanish. So this kind of captures the essence of overcoming false ego, describing it as an illusion that fades away with our understanding. So we saw the rapid emotion of the emotional shifts with the father. It's like a perfect metaphor of how we mistakenly identify with material circumstances. So let's move on. And as I mentioned, it's close to home. This is the Pacific Palisades. And this is where it was a drone video taken by my son. And there were some very close people to us that lived there. And this is material existence. Prabhupada said it's compared with a blazing fire. Forest fire means nobody goes to set a fire in the forest, but it takes place automatically. Similarly, in this material world, however, peacefully you want to live, and without God consciousness, you cannot live peacefully. That's what Srila Prabhupada said. So someone very close to and dear to us has their home right there on the top of the hill there. And you can see it just comes and devours everything in its path. And it seemed to have like a mind of its own, because the house right next door was spared. But the other house is just wiped, just completely wiped out. So this is just to give an idea that this is close to home. We all experience this, and we're all in living entities, we're all human beings in this community. So that's the home there on the bottom that was destroyed amongst all the other homes. So this is a close-up view. So thus, when everything in the mature world is annihilated, that spiritual nature remains the same. It's eternal. And it's the purpose of human life to reach that spiritual sky. Unfortunately, people are not aware of the reality of the spiritual sky. According to the Srimad Bhagavatam, people do not know their self-interest. They don't know that human life is meant for understanding spiritual reality and preparing oneself to be transferred to that reality. No one can remain here in this material world. Even if you want to, you can't remain. So there's another amazing story. We're going to go back to the Srimad Bhagavatam. Look at that home. This is an amazing home. This is like what the demigods enjoy. This is like an aerial mansion. And this is in the Srimad Bhagavatam. This is in the 9th canto. Yes. And this is a king, Chitraketu. And we face our battles here on earth. And we may think, well, let's go to heaven. It'll be a wonderful place. But even in the heavenly planets, there's difficulties. And this is one such story that's given in the Srimad Bhagavatam. So this is King Chitraketu in his flying palace. And he was flying around Mount Sumeru in his, you could call it a kind of an airplane. It was actually given to him by Lord Vishnu himself. And he was leading the Vijaharas, chanting Krishna's glories. And so by all external standards, he was living the spiritual dream of life, right? But then something happened that would seem like a terrible setback. So during his travels, he saw Lord Shiva with Parvati sitting on his lap. And he made a mistake by criticizing them. Look at Lord Shiva there. He's speaking to all these renunciants about renunciation. But his wife is sitting on his lap. And he's embracing her. And he's talking about renunciation. So Chitraketu made a comment. But he wasn't criticizing, he was actually glorifying. But Lord Shiva's wife didn't take it that way. So she became angry and she cursed him to become a demon. So just imagine that. Going from an exalted king flying around in the spiritual airplane to becoming a demon. We would think that would be devastation. But what's really amazing in this story, and it's beautiful, is you know what Chitraketu did? He immediately got down from his airplane. He bowed down to Parvati and accepted the curse with complete humility. And he didn't blame anyone. And he didn't become bitter. He saw it as Krishna's arrangement. So that curse turned him into this demon, Vritrasura. And so it goes on. And it's amazing, even though he was in a demon body, we could say the mode of ignorance, he gave the most profound teachings about devotional service to King Indra, who was his enemy and who was fighting. So right in the middle of battle, he was giving Indra teachings on devotional service. And he taught him, he said, we're all like wooden puppets. Just like our beginning image we showed of the three modes of material nature. We're in the hands of the puppeteer. Everything happens by Krishna's will. Even while in his body was being destroyed in the battle, he remained fixed in Krishna consciousness. So this is what happened. He was actually so powerful. His name was Vrita, which means covered everything. He grew so huge that he was able to destroy planets. And all the demigods are trying to attack him and defeat him. and they threw all their weapons at him, and he just merely swallowed them. And you can see on the bottom of his feet, he's just stomping on them. And Indra threw his club at him, and he caught the club, and he just hit Indra with it again. And Indra was discouraged, but he was encouraged by Vitrasura in this battle. It's a big story. We don't have much time to discuss it all. And if anybody's, I have a few more slides, and if you want to stay, you're welcome. If you want to leave, it's okay. I won't take any offense if you like to leave. So this is what happens here. So Indra received this thunderbolt, which was empowered with Vishnu's potency. And Indra was ashamed because everything he tried didn't work. But Vitrasura encouraged him, please, use your thunderbolt. It's empowered by Vishnu. It's infallible. And so he was encouraged by Indra. And then he was preaching to him, and Indra actually praised him. And because Vitrasura, the demon, knew that in his next life he'll go back to Godhead. And all Indra wanted was to be comfortable in his heavenly planet. And so they both were devotees, and they both got their desires. So we have to be careful what we desire, because we may get those things. So this is very interesting. So we see that Indra had his life purpose. He wanted material victory. He wanted heavenly enjoyment. He wanted to focus on his position, sense gratification. He actually had limited understanding of spiritual principles, even though he was a devotee. And Vitrasura was more knowledgeable, and he instructed him. And what was Vitrasura's life purpose? Devotional service. He wanted to go back home, back to Godhead. He wanted to die. He wanted to give up this body because he knew, even though he fought, he wasn't a coward. He fought, and he could have killed them all. But he knew that this was an opportunity to detach from his material desires and get unalloyed devotion to Krishna. And he just accepted God's will. So just see, amazing. So the similarities is that as I mentioned, they're both devotees. And however, their devotion differed. Their intentions and their ultimate goals were different. So we have to analyze our purposes and see how we're driven. What is our life purposes? You see, are they eternal purposes? Are we just coming for something? For money? For food? We have to analyze, we have to have very clear objectives of what we really want, where our consciousness is, because that'll take us to where we want to go. So we have to have this purpose-driven life, to learn what it means to focus on Krishna every day, what it means to detach, like that. So this is all important. It's all now about living with intention, aligning our will with Krishna's will, and constantly striving for devotion. It's not passive. You see, it requires awareness, effort, and actually love for Krishna. So going to the Chaitanya Charitamrita, as I mentioned, this is another analogy where it talks about, he's talking about the fall of the conditioned soul, the conditioned state, the symptoms, the path to liberation, how to understand these things. So Lord Chaitanya was explaining this to one of his devotees. His name is Sanatan Goswami, about the science of the absolute truth. And within this teachings, he's talking about an analogy. And we're going to talk about this analogy here, about the soul's journey back to Krishna. So we'll end with this particular story. And this is about the hidden treasure. And this is based on those teachings to Sanatan Goswami that we saw there. So there's this allegory is about a poor man in distress. So it just so happened that an astrologer came to visit him. And he said, I can tell by your reading your palms and your astrology, all these things, that your father left wealth unknown to you. And so, in the same way, we're in this material distress, but Vedic knowledge is like the astrologer. It reveals our spiritual treasure as Krishna, our eternal Father. our eternal relationship is forgotten. So, but he warns him. He says, he actually buried the treasure right in your house here, outside. But he gave him some warnings. He said, don't dig on the southern side of the house, because if you go there, there's going to be wasps and drones. And that's considered to be like karmakanda. It's like the repeated bites of material reactions. And also, don't go on the western side, because there's a ghost, and it'll give you much disturbances. And that represents the jnana kanda, the mental speculations. And that results in just mental disturbances and confusion. And he said, don't go on the northern side either, because there's a huge black snake. And that represents mystic yoga. The result of that is spiritual suicide through impersonalism. But he said on the eastern side, if you dig, you'll have success. And that represents our bhakti yoga, our devotional service. And that's the direct access to the treasure. So we see here only devotional service will satisfy us. It's accessible by everyone. It purifies our consciousness, and it develops our natural love for Krishna. So this is what he finds is the treasure. So our Krishna consciousness journey is about awakening to this truth. And what's wonderful about it is that this Vedic literature gives us the perfect roadmap for this journey, like Lord Chaitanya explained to Sanatana Goswami about this journey and how to get there. So, and then this is our ultimate achievement. We develop this love for Krishna and serve Krishna in the spiritual world, as we could see here. And this is also close to home. This is our home. Once Prabhupada was being interviewed by the Associated Press in New York, and he said, "Where is your main home?" And Prabhupada said, "My home is back home, back to Godhead." And the person said, "Is where?" And he said, "Back to Godhead, with God." And Prabhupada said, "That is my real home. That means every temple is my home." So this is our home. Even now, we're close to home. The miseries are so close to us, but yet the spiritual world is also so close to us. So liberation is not escaping the material world, but it's realizing our true identity within it. And if we maintain proper consciousness while performing duties, we can be spiritually free, even while engaged in the material world. So that's our plan. So Prabhupada wanted us to take this Krishna consciousness movement very seriously. And I'd like to just end with another quote or conversation Srila Prabhupada gave, basically saying something very similar. So I'll just play that now. Krishna Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jai Srila Prabhupada. So just see, Prabhupada, there's many quotes where he talks about just less than 1% becomes Krishna consciousness. The world can change, could turn into the spiritual world. There will be peace. It will become ideal. So this is amazing. So thank you for your patience. And you're very detached to the feast. But it's being served. I'm sure there's some left. But any comments or questions anybody would like to bring up, or realizations? Everything was clear? Great. Well, thank you again. All glories to Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, Chaitanya Charitamrita. Srila Prabhupada. Okay.